thank you for joining the session on what to do for thrombectomy. This is part of the Neuro Resus Lab education series. I'm Human Khosravani. So when a patient comes for thrombectomy, the current situation is that we make a decision to go and we speak with our interventionalist, and typically the interventionalist calls the anesthetist. The challenge with this situation is that the care of the patient in the angiography suite is occurring with the Code Stroke nurse, who is not yet been able to directly communicate with her or his colleague anesthetist who they're working with, and we have not passed on the crux of the clinical information to the anesthetist, and we're the main people to be able to do that in a good way because we are with the patient. So the suggestion is, if the patient is going for thrombectomy, and if the decision is yes, if we believe that a CT angiogram is required, we then go through the standard CT pathway where we take the patient to the scanner and we CT them. At that point, two things need to happen. If the patient was accepted from the outside, we would have originally activated the thrombectomy notification page. Once we have decided to take the patient to the scanner, we need to activate the thrombectomy go-to page. Before doing so, what we're suggesting is to do what's called the huddle. The huddle is between ourselves and the Code Stroke nurse, and at that time, what we do is call the anesthetist. The anesthetist can be reached at extension 7878, and by calling the anesthetist, we're able to provide a clinical history about the patient and provide handover about the patient. At that point, in a consensus between stroke neurology, the stroke nurse who's looking after the patient, and also the anesthetist, we make a go or no-go decision to go to the angiography suite. If the decision is to go to the angio suite, the thrombectomy notification page is activated and we proceed to go forward. Now, the advantage of doing so is that the anesthetist has heard directly from us. We have provided a degree of transfer of accountability to the anesthetist because after we sign the thrombectomy order set, the anesthetist is actually the person responsible for any issues that the patient may require resuscitation for. And by us calling them, we have provided that medical legal handover and an effective handover to the anesthetist. In addition, by putting ideally this call on speaker, having the nurse be able to speak with the anesthetist as well through us or hear the conversation, the nurse who's primarily responsible for the patient has now been able to actually speak or at least be part of the conversation and also speak to the anesthetist. And I think that's super important. We discovered that when a CT is not required, so if a patient is coming for thrombectomy and you are not going to be CTing them, in addition to still having a huddle with yourself and the Code Stroke nurse and calling the anesthetist at extension 7878, what needs to happen is also calling the CT scanner. And the reason is, as we await for the team to come in the after hours section, especially after hours, the technologists that are in the building, one of them may be able to actually proceed with angio. But if we bypass the scanner, they don't know that we're in the building. So it turns out that at evenings, after hours, right now there's more frequently, more often than not, 2 CT scan techs in the building. We don't a priori know if the scanner is staffed by people who know how to do angio. If we bypass the scanner completely, we have not told them that we're doing a thrombectomy case, and that actually may cause delay. So what we're suggesting is to have the huddle, but also to call the scanner at extension 2490 to tell them that we're about to take a case, or essentially we've discussed a case going for thrombectomy, and that they do not require a CT scan. But by calling the scanner, we can then harness the technologist. Just before closing the video, I also wanted to say that the Code Stroke nurses are a valuable resource in being able to explain this process. And of course, by speaking with Nalisha, you can get further information as we've developed this pathway together and through a larger consensus with our anesthesia colleagues. If you have any questions about any of these pathways, feel free to look at codestroke.net, so codestroke.net, or get in touch with me for any additional information. Thank you and bye-bye.